Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to The Takeout. The dust has settled in Iowa's primaries, and it is beginning to settle in California. We will have the most important races and some undercovered races in both states with Julie Watts in California and Lana in Iowa. And, of course, we'll have your friend and mine, Anthony Salvanto, with the numbers inside the numbers. Iowa saw a rare setback for President Trump in the governor's race. His candidate, the one he endorsed, Congressman Randy Feenstra, did not win his party's nomination. And California will no doubt be roiled by the long-shot insurgent candidacies of Republican Steve Hilton for governor and Spencer Pratt for mayor of Los Angeles. Neither mention Trump much, but they do bash bureaucratic lethargy, housing shortages, educational stagnation, and outsized affordability woes, which persist in California even when inflation nationally is relatively tame. And we all know inflation isn't tame right now. California's lopsided Democratic voter registration means neither Hilton nor Pratt is on a path to win in the general election. But that may matter less than how Hilton and Pratt will inevitably use voter dissatisfaction and agitation for change to alter the course of promises made in the City of Angels and in Sacramento. Iowa could be on the cusp of seismic tremors more familiar to the topography of California. You see, Democrats have not won a governor's race there since 2006. They haven't won a Senate race there since 2008. Both appear possible this cycle, even though President Trump carried the state, as we discussed last night, by 13 points in 2024. We start tonight, as promised, with our CBS investigative correspondent, Julie Watts, who is in Sacramento. Julie, great to see you. Let's start with that mayor's race in L.A.
So, it's still too early to call. We do know that Karen Bass will be one of the top two. The question is now, is it Spencer Pratt or Nithya Raman? And, I do think it's important to note here that in the last election, at this point, Rick Caruso was out ahead. And then L.A. got basically a big dump of progressive ballots in at the last minute, and that brought Karen Bass up to the winning spot. So could we see more votes coming in for Nithya as we see these votes come in, as we see these ballots come in? Keep in mind, we are a mostly mail-in ballot state, so a lot of those votes still out there. The one thing that I'm told that is for certain is we will see Pratt come down and Nithya Raman come up before the end of this, which could be sort of concerning or disheartening for the Pratt supporters. That does not mean that she's definitely going to win, but there certainly will be more twists and turns before we get to the end of this story.
Julie, I'm very glad you mentioned that. I might have been premature in my declaration about what Spencer Pratt may or may not do in the general. He's got to qualify first, meaning finish in the top two. The governor's race, do you believe that one is more or less resolved?
I think for all intents and purposes, it is pretty resolved. At this point, it would be very difficult for Tom Steyer to get enough votes, even though there are still a lot of ballots outstanding, to surpass either Javier Becerra or Steve Hilton. I do think one thing that's notable is, and we mentioned this in some of the segments we did early on in this election season, but Eric Swalwell got 18,000 votes. He obviously dropped out amid scandal. Betty Yee, who dropped out, got 25,000 votes. So there are a lot of votes going to people who are not those top three. So even if Tom Steyer, you just can't realistically imagine that Tom Steyer could get enough votes. But again, listen, there have been so many plot twists in this governor's election. I'm not ruling anything out. I just don't think, and I think the most people don't think it's likely.
Speaking of plot twists, there is a fascinating development in the House race, District 6. And this is fascinating in light of what was redrawn in California and Kevin Kiley, Republican, switching party identification to independent. What's going on?
This is actually, to me, I think the most exciting race as we move towards the general. Well, first of all, I live in District 6, so I'm a little biased. However, Kevin Kiley switched, as you mentioned, from a Republican to an independent. He is, for lack of a better way to put it, a firebrand. He is an anti-Newsom Republican, or at least he has been, pro-MAGA Republican. And when they redrew this district, he was one of the key people they were trying to get rid of and replace with a Democrat, right? Well, this showing that he has right now 28,000 votes, not just in Placer County, which is more conservative and which was part of his original district, but also getting votes sort of in top third or fourth spot in Sacramento County, in Yolo County, which is very sort of progressive. It leans blue. That is shocking. Here's what's even more shocking is this district was drawn specifically to not allow for this to happen. But right now there is a chance, albeit it's still early, but the Republican, Michael Sansfield, who is for all intents and purposes sort of an unknown, but he was the only name on the ballot with an R next to it. He and Kylie could be the top two, meaning there would not be a Democrat in this district in the general election that was drawn specifically to give Democrats a seat in the House. And, honestly, Major, what's even more interesting to me is if we saw Kylie win. So let's say the logic is that Richard Pan will come up and that it will end up being Kylie and Richard Pan on the ballot in the general election. The standard thinking is there's no way that that somebody who is not a Democrat could win this newly drawn district. But I leave you with this. Steve Poizner was a Republican in California. He ran as an independent for insurance commissioner in 2018. He lost. But I am told he won this newly drawn district as a Republican turned independent. Could Kevin Kiley be the first independent to win a major race in California? To me, that's what's most interesting about all of this. And I will tell you that national Democrats are probably looking at District 6 right now saying, what did we do wrong? And what can we do to make sure that Kiley does not win in November?
And one of the quick dynamics for Richard Pan, the Democrat who is closest to getting into that top two, is there were other Democrats in the race who divided the Democratic vote, and that made it more complicated for Richard Pan. We'll keep an eye on the 6th District of California. Julie Watts, thank you very much. To help us understand the dynamics of today's primaries or the results that we know from yesterday's primaries in Iowa, let's bring in CBS's Lana, who joins us from Iowa City. Lana, take it away.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, Major. Let's talk about what an interesting state Iowa is, because not only did President Trump win it in the last 3 elections, it has trended more conservative and more Republican in each subsequent election. So it is notable that his endorsed candidate for the governorship, Randy Feenstra, he didn't actually win the Republican primary. That honor instead went to Zach Lane. He's a farmer and a businessman. We're going to see how he connects with that MAGA base, which he continued to reach out to even after he didn't receive that endorsement. He's also been really plugged into MAHA, which in this state, which has high cancer rates, that combination with his own experiences as a farmer potentially is going to be very powerful for him, though it is a notable loss in President Trump, whose popularity ratings have really cratered, particularly among rural and white voters across the country, and here especially as people have faced higher gas prices, farmers have been struggling, and the war is increasingly unpopular, Major.
And that may be something that gives Democrats hope in not only the governor's race, but specifically in the Senate race. What happened there?
Well, in the Senate race, easily Congresswoman Ashley Hinton took away the Republican nomination. That wasn't a surprise for anyone, but what was much more neck and neck was the Democratic nomination. And I thought that the fact that Zach Waltz, who was much more of a progressive, who campaigned against Chuck Schumer and actually pledged that he would not vote for the minority leader, the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate, that didn't resonate with Democrats here. Instead, we saw really how people became excited about Josh Turek speaking to that populist message at a time when people are struggling or fearful financially. You know, his ads here in Iowa were talking about growing up and having the wrong color lunch ticket, about how he knew what it was like to grow up and have a subsidized meal and some of the shame and the pain. He received a lot of money from Washington, from a veterans organization, even though he himself is not a veteran. He's a Paralympian who's medaled. And Democrats really see him as the best potential chance they have to win that Senate seat from Joni Ernst. It is going to be a nail-biter, Major. We are really interested in what's happening in Iowa.
Joni Ernst not running for re-election. Ashley Hinton, Josh Turek will be in the general election. Lana, thank you very, very much. Want to bring in, you know it, You love it. Your friend and mine, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, who has the numbers inside the numbers on the House, an untold story. So, Anthony, please, I beg of you, take it away.
And first, Major, folks know, they watch us. It's been an election. They're going to see maps, right?
Maps.
And between you and I, right, they know they're going to see Southern California maps if we get a chance.
For sure.
Let's unpack this. Look, let me show you the Steve Hilton vote here, because there really is a story in it. And all day people have been asking me, when are you going to call California? Well, you know, there is a chance, an outside chance, that Steyer could make up some ground here, but we'll keep an eye on that. Big story out of this is my expected vote has gone up to over 9 million. People probably saw us last night. I wrote 8.5 million on the board. They said, oh, no, they're going to turn out. So they did turn out in force yesterday. The purple areas here are Steve Hilton's counties where he won. He really consolidated that Republican vote. I'm going to go down here, and courtesy of our friends at Vote Hub, I'm going to zoom in to Southern California because there's a story in this. If I first go up to Orange County, you're going to see these areas here in yellow, Santa Ana, a little more Hispanic vote. And the Democratic vote there, okay, that went for Becerra. But look at all these areas in purple, wealthier areas, Newport Beach, et cetera, all where Hilton consolidated that Republican vote. And, of course, I'm going to take you down to San Diego, right? Here's San Diego, central part of the city. Same kind of story where you saw as you got out towards El Cajon and further out then towards Inland Empire, Hilton again consolidating that Republican vote. So he basically did what he needed to do going into this. That's really your story. And last piece is, I remind everybody, this count is pretty typical for California. We don't always notice because it's not always competitive, but it takes days for all of this to unfold. So sort of hang on and be patient. We'll get updates every evening.
Anything else from last night catch your eye, Anthony?
Yeah, real quick, I want to show you another House race I'm keeping my eye on, and this is the 40th. Here's another one where you may or may not see a Democrat get into the runoff. Remember, after redistricting in Prop 50, Democrats were counting on California to have at least 4 or 5 more districts lean their way. If Democrats don't get into the runoffs here, a lot of that goes away. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on, and a couple that'll be competitive, the 45th and the 48th, as we go towards November. So keep an eye on that Southern California region again, because control of the House may well go through California come November, Major.
Which means we'll all be up very late at night. Anthony Salvanto, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.